How's everybody doing? I'm a loud dude, but I'm still going to use a microphone, so just a warning, okay? While we're waiting for this to load, how about a round of applause for Fly Project and House of Fly? They've been doing a good thing here, taking care of us, putting on an event that you're able to come and get a bunch of information from and kind of take out on your own and really kind of develop your own style. That's really what these events are about, just to get out, enjoy your backyard and catch some fish. I am going to be talking about the fly side of things. I definitely love tying, so I'm going to focus on that. There will be some presentation stuff that I will cover, but it's really going to be related to what I'm doing behind the vise. A quick show of hands. Who here does tie? All right, so most is going to get it. Those who don't tie, well, if you don't, okay. Should have been more hands than that, but okay. Anyone that wants to tie? Cool, all right. So for those of you who tie, I'm certainly going to have moments where I probably go a little deeper than you would probably think. It's totally okay. I'll do all the nerdy stuff and you can benefit from that. I'll share all the information. I'm okay with that. But I tend to get a little overboard and go deep, so understand that I'm well aware of that. And I will apologize a little bit at the beginning. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start off talking about the basic approach about what I'm going to do behind the vise when we start tying a fly. What am I going to cover today? Basically, the chassis is going to be it's where it all starts. The chassis is what's going to develop the fly, how it works subsurface, and have it do what we want it to do. The goal in the end game, like, are you tying a dry fly? Do you want something to sink deep in water? Do you have heavy current? Are you in a pond or a lake that has nothing going on and you need something that lands softly and sinks slowly? So observe your fishery and what's happening within that fishery, and you can make said adjustments to your fly behind the vise. You don't have to be the deep diving nerd on fly tying. Just observe some of the things that are happening and logically go back to the vise and then try and solve those riddles. It's really all I was doing, and I just kind of took it to the nth degree. Notate deals in writing. How many times have you had a recipe online, you cook it, it comes out great. Then you go back and you make your own adjustments, and it's even better. But you didn't take any of the notes or the measurements of the ingredients that you changed in the recipe. Now you have no idea what you did. It's important that if you're making these changes or you're doing things, notate them. Just a little note to what you did, so now when you go back, if it worked or didn't work, you can now make adjustments knowing what you did or didn't do. Techniques and adhesives. I've got a soapbox on adhesives, so I'll get to that when that comes down. And then technique. I teach a 201 tying class, and I am all about good technique supported by the proper or adequate adhesive. We don't have to go with one adhesive all the time. Certain adhesives have strengths and weaknesses, so knowing what those strengths and weaknesses are will allow you to pick the proper adhesive for the task. And then my leader setup. That's pretty controversial in that we're all going to have a different leader setup. So this here is just my setup. I got this from my mentor. It works in my area. They use longer leaders here. They use shorter leaders in places. So I'll cover my leader setup. And again, everybody that talks, just see what they're doing, try everything, and find out what works for you. And you can, again, Frankenstein your own style. And then eventually, you'll have your own style. All right. Are we ready? Oh, I said, are we ready?
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna deep dive on us here. Okay, so the chassis. There we go. Woo. So when the hook goes into the jaws, I've always said that's when the hoodwinking and the trickery begins. That's when we start the plan to fool the fish to eat our phony bug. And again, the chassis is the most important element work of our design. If the chassis is not true, if that chassis is not working for a subsurface, then all the work and time that we put in behind the vise is just for naught. So if you're gonna sit behind the vise, try and make that time worth it. We're busy people. It only gets busier as we get older. So that time behind the vise is critical. It's very important to get what you want out of it when you're behind the vise. So putting time into your chassis so you can count on that every time. I don't have to really question what I'm doing when I'm designing flies because I already have these preset chassis that I know can work. The only time I really have to do something different is when I develop something outside of the chassis that I've already developed, and then I'm back to square one going, all right, let's develop another chassis to figure out what I want it to get done or do what I want it to do. So forged hooks are an absolute must. It's just it's non-negotiable in my opinion. I mean, I need to count on that. I need Japanese steel forged hooks, end of story. I don't want that hook to foul or bend out, break, or fail me once I'm on a fish. Reliable hooks that you can depend on and build around. It seems like it's repetitive there, but it's not, because hooks that I like that are forged may not be the hooks that you like. We all have different tastes, so don't think you have to use the hooks I'm using. Just find one you like, make sure it's forged. And then build and weigh your chassis. Here's the nerd part. I like weighing my flies, because now that gives me context of when I see a fly sink or have a slower descent, I now know the materials I use with that chassis at that weight is gonna put me in that ballpark. I kind of already have an idea of what that fly is gonna do just based on the weight of my chassis. And quite honestly, you start getting to know your fly intimately when you weigh them out that way. So we always have an end game. By the way, that's my hipster doofus. That's a pretty damn good fly. Okay. I'm biased though. Have a clear understanding what it is you're trying to do or accomplish on the vise. That sounds pretty obvious as well, but if you're like me, you get glossed over and you can probably start one idea and go to another and then another, and by the time you're done, it wasn't anything that you were trying to do. So for me, it was making sure that I maintain focus from the beginning of my idea through the end of the fly, so I can at least make the most out of my time. What are you trying to do? I talked about that earlier about water conditions. Am I looking for a soft landing fly? Am I looking for a heavy fly? I design differently from the river, to a lake or a pond or a reservoir. I'm in from Denver, and we've got the Denver South Platte that runs through our city. We are super fortunate to have an urban river that runs through. I'll have some pictures at the end to show you, but I design differently for the river than I do for Stillwater, because there's two starkly different environments. Even though we have some slow-moving flats, it's not the same as here. Because it's a river, these fish have options. So they're not gonna hang out on a flat when they can hang out near a pylon or a wood brush pile. And they have protection that way. So we rarely see them on the flats, although we will. Most times they're gonna be around structure. So I tend to have heavier flies in general for my river, because I have to get through CFS and sometimes some depth. So my lift kit consists of 2 bars of .30 lead cut to 4 millimeters, and those 3 flies there, or 4 now, are on that lift kit. Now the hipster doofus, the HVRT, and just those 2 are Umpqua patterns. The other 2 have not been submitted. I'm keeping those to myself at the moment. You can buy them though on nervouswaterflies.com. Shameless plug. But that chassis it's just not a one fly chassis. It's about what that chassis does. Now the only time that chassis will vary is when I put materials on there that aren't gonna work with it. So I'm very, very cognizant of what I'm choosing to put on the body and how I'm putting it on. And if I'm not, then I'm gonna take all the work that I just put into that chassis and it's done, it's gone. It's just not gonna do what I want it to do. So I'm very aware of the materials I'm picking, how I'm applying them, making sure that I keep the integrity of my lift kit and make sure it works out right. And again, this lift kit, I'm gonna get into it next with a picture, I'll explain it in detail, is critical to my design going forward. And I implore you to try this if you're a tyer. It's a great way to kind of get a fly to turn over and not add too much weight to it. And then I approach my lift kits with the intent to find the point of imbalance and unleash my focus there. And what I mean by that is I don't want this fly to be heavy and turn over. I would rather have it slowly roll. So I get it. I'm asking you to tie. They look big there, by the way. Just like you know, 4 millimeters is not big. I apologize for this, but it will pay off in the end. I started off with a hook shank's length. I want to say it was closer to 10 mil at .15 or .10. And as my lift kit got shorter, I increased the diameter of the lead. I started with .15, I shortened it, went to 20, shortened it, went to 25 to 30. I wasn't looking for weight, I was looking for height. So my example is always, think of a Jeep, tires are too big, they take a corner, and now they got this, they're gonna fall over kind of thing. I just didn't want it to turn over. I wanted the eyes to be higher off the shank to offset this is the weight that we're looking to work with. That distance from the shank down to the hook point is the leverage on that fly. Now there's a few things that you can, out of the gate, help you with turning a fly over. The down eye is the first thing. Before you even get to the lift kit, the down eye puts weight under the hook shank, offsets this, forces it to turn over. It's going to want to turn over because of the down eye. It may not, because we may tie a fly that just takes that away. Now, I always tell everybody, when you're tying tails in on a carp fly, take it to the hook bend, even with this. East of the Mississippi, it's called tail creep. West of the Mississippi, it's called tail drag. I don't care which one you use. Dragging the tail creates another down eye on the back end of the fly. Now, you've got a double down eye. Really looking to turn that fly over. Add in the lift kit, and now I've lifted the eyes up and made them imbalanced. Look how straight and flat the top of those two bars are. So this is awesome. If we take bead chain eyes, which are super, super skinny, the bar, and put them on a hook, we've got two round objects that we're trying to make stable. It's not a fair fight. But when it's flat, we now put that round bar on a flat surface. Way more stable, ties in a lot tighter. It will hold you over for seasons. Super, super strong. So this here, in conjunction with, if you have tail drag, and a down eye, will absolutely help you turn that fly over in a very consistent way. Now, there are some advantages. As I mentioned, the flat foundation, better than a round one, and then that wire foundation will also help stabilize those eyes. So this is going to, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself with adhesives, but the adhesive that I apply to that section is not Zap-A-Gap, it's the water-based loom. I'll let that sit, we'll cover that when I get to adhesives, but there is a reason that I'm not using Zap there. Okay, more nerd stuff. Measure and tie with intent. Well, the measure and weigh thing, if you want to go down this road, I do believe is pretty beneficial to anybody that wants to get in there and find out what your fly's doing. Back to taking notes, you just can't rinse and repeat and keep putting flies out consistently unless you know what's going on. The adjustments, as hokey as this sounds, it's not for the fish yet, it's for the fly. If the fly stinks and isn't doing what you want it to do, the fish is probably not going to do what you want it to do. But if you can trust the fly and you've honored what you were trying to do, at least now you know it's going to work for you once it goes subsurface. Again, remembering the adjustments is important, but once it's done and you've beta tested it, it's doing what you want it to do, adjustments are a thumbs up, then you can go, all right, cool. Now we'll give it to the fish. And then, this sounds so pompous. So, materials with intention. What I mean by that is, don't just grab a material because you think it looks good. How's that going to affect the fly? So my background is in audio. I am a big vibration and energy and frequency guy. So I like staging different materials in my fly that puts off a microscopic or a small vibration. That vibration, as it falls, could be an injured bug, could be a swimming bug, I don't know. But if it's vibrating or moving or as the water rolls over those materials, lateral lines are picking that up. So choosing with intention, I do feel is going to help you when it comes to actually getting a fly to feel and vibrate on the way down. That's my friend Richard. Tough crowd. Solid technique and the appropriate adhesive. Okay. So again, I am not on a high horse here, by the way. If you want to use Zap, knock yourself out. This is not like hard fast. I promise there are no rules. However, my nerdy self has gone down the road and figured out what works and doesn't work for me. And if you want that information to use, it's all yours. I basically found out that Zap has strengths and weaknesses, and we were using it in situations where the weakness was working against us. Anyone here remember the old super glue commercial? Guy's on like a hard hat, he's glued to the top, right? Super glues, he doesn't fall. if someone walked up and just pushed him, he would have fallen. Zap works well this way and this way. It's not so good perpendicular and off. So when you start putting a round, thin bead chain or lead eye on a round hook, and then expect it to A, hold, and then B, the zap to hold it on top of that, you're not giving anything in that equation a chance to succeed. So the flat base with the lift kit, first line of success. I've got a small round object going over a flat surface. That's a win. But if you use zap, I'm worried about the perpendicular motion, and you're going to get a lot of that when the fly's in a fish's mouth. So I found that the Loon water-based head cement is the jam. It dries like a latex. That little bit of give doesn't allow the eyes of the lift kit to crack and just start spinning. So it's got this absorbance and this give to allow those eyes and that lift kit to live a little longer. Big, big fan of that. As a matter of fact, zap only comes into the equation at the end. It's a little bit on my thread, a few wraps, and a whip finish on top of that. That's it, that's all. I'm talking like 1/8 of an inch to a quarter. We'll get you 6 or 7 wraps and then whip on top of that. Now you've got a good technique whip finish on top of Zap-A-Gap wraps. It won't come unwrapped, you're good. So again, the bead chain eyes and the dumbbells, matching the right adhesive to your task will increase the durability and the life of that fly. And again, those strengths and weaknesses, these are just my observations and what I found doing it, you know? I'm sorry, dude, am I boring you? It's okay. So these attributes, knowing what your adhesives do, you can unknowingly frustrate yourself with the fly without knowing the adhesives are the inaccurate decision and thinking that your technique is off. Maybe your technique's good, but the adhesive that you happen to choose doesn't really support the good technique. And now you're on the wrong road thinking you have to make an adjustment with your technique when your technique is fine. You just happen to choose one little thing that compromised that technique in a particular application. So knock yourself out, try them all. I do find the Loon water-based glue on my eyes work pretty darn good. Pretty good. Hey, and there they are. Zap and my water-based Loon. Now, I'm a nerd on this stuff too. I have a strip of Velcro on my table. I glue the fuzzy side, a piece of Velcro on the bottom, and they stay glued to my table. They can't knock over, they can't spill. They're never closed all the way. They're just sitting on top. So I need them, I pick up the brush, I do what I need to do, and I put it back. I don't have to drop the bobbin, pick it up, unscrew it, put it on, screw it back in, put it back down. As a production tyer, it takes too long. So that's my system. I don't spill glue anymore, and they're easily accessible. Oh boy. All right, so I use traditionally a 0 or a 1X leader. It doesn't matter, I just need a heavier leader. They're usually 9 feet. If I'm in still water, it's gonna be a 7-footer. I'll buy a 7.5 because that's what they sell. I lop off the bottom 2 feet of either one and replace that with fluoro. So nylon to fluoro is my rig. I did bring fluoro leaders out here because I haven't fished this fishery before and I didn't know what to expect. So just to be safe, I brought fluoro leaders. But generally I can save myself a few bucks, buy the nylon leader, lop off my bottom 2 feet, fluoro up, and I'm good to go with that. Now, here's where it really gets cool. So my mentor behind the Vice is Jay Zimmerman. Anybody familiar with Jay Zimmerman? Yeah, right on. So I was super fortunate to have Jay working at a fly shop minutes from my house. He was unbelievably awesome in sharing information. He has a book out right now that's been out for a while, highly recommended, Carp Flies, How to Tie and Fish Them. He is beyond gracious in giving up all the information that he learned along the way, and that's how I ended up getting into this. So that's Jay's leader setup. I just mimicked him in the beginning, and it worked. So I didn't find a reason to change it until I had to. Floating line setup is my bargain basement intermediate. What I mean by that, is my floating line to my nylon leader to the fluoro. So bargain basement intermediate, floating line. There's more mass in the nylon leader, so it sinks a little more, and there's more mass in the fluorocarbon. So I basically have that 45. But my flies have a ton of resistance tied into them. So what happens is I get a bow, fly line, nylon, fluoro, fly. That fly is slowing that whole descent down of the nylon and the fluoro, creating a bow, which normally we would not want. But if I put a fly out there that's heavy and it drops straight down, it's an unnatural descent. Food doesn't drop straight down, food's moving with the current. This allows the fly to fall on an arc rather than a vertical drop. Fish tailing, fly straight down. I run the chance of that fish feeling it was unnatural. In off water, I can't see it, I'm gonna do that. More times than not, if I'm sight fishing, I want this arc to be the presentation of the fly. So this fish is fish eating right here. I know that my vision is right in that 10 to 1 o'clock is the sweet spot, right? I usually tell everybody, think of the gills and draw a circle from gill to gill, and you'll be good as far as presentation. Knock out the front with the blind spot, and you should be good. But that arc allows us a sense of reality or of genuine living being of some sort. I really want the presentation to motivate the fish to move to the fly. I'm a move the fish rather than force it to eat guy. I feel that and believe wholeheartedly, no matter if they're a prolific eater or trout, they operate calories out, calories in. So if I can get that fish to move and burn calories, then it's a good chance he's gonna eat. So I do dig having that arc sweep down. That fish is eating, and having something do this versus that, I feel gives me a little bit of an advantage. All right, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the DSP and how I designed for this as well. So these will be photos from Carp Slam. We run an annual fundraising event in Denver called the Carp Slam. And you have a team of two. It's gonna be a pro and an amateur, or we call a slamateur for Carp Slam. And it's all over you have a beat assigned in the morning and the night, and it's the whole Denver South Platte. It's an unbelievable day. We raise a bunch of money for our river, and like this, you have like-minded individuals that really wanna chase carp. That's Russ Miller, two-time back-to-back champ. Current, by the way, the last 2 years he won. So I told him the pressure's on this year. And again, even this beat here, there's flat style, but they're not holding on flats. So this is a challenge as a designer. I'll have a channel, let's just call this the channel right here in the front row. And then you have a sandbar, and the carp will traditionally eat up the sandbar, hit the channel, they'll drop back, and they're gonna come back, and they're gonna go back up the sandbar. And that just takes observing what they're doing. We're fortunate that we'll have bridges. You can get up on a ped bridge or even the street and look over and just watch what they're doing. It's just critical information, because now when you go down, you actually have some context to what's happening from the ground view. We don't really get to see from above all the time. Well, Ryan does. Where's Ryan? Yeah. So it's important to know, again, what you're tying for. So I can't necessarily tie just a light fly because they're not always on the sandbar. What happens if they're just into the deeper water? What if they're holding in the channel? So having a mix of weights is just so important. When they're on the flats, I'm loving life because I can fish that sandbar now with my unweighted or lighter flies. Again, that's Russ. No one likes to show off, Russ. This is the 6th Avenue / Colfax beat. You guys don't know what that is. That's the Colfax Bridge is just to the right here, going over, and you can go up top and sight fish these fish. The next picture is going to be the inside shot of the bridge from the other side, just to the left or behind that woman on the bike. So, again, this is an unbelievable way to think about fly design. It's great, those pylons up there, that you can get up in between those and then pick fish off from up top. But this particular run, And it's a river, and they're all gonna be different. Designing a fly for this run is odd because there's a lot of depth and the fish are actually holding low and then coming up and eating along the wall. They're eating in a column where the the lighter fly would work, but at the same time, they hold a little deeper. So having some depth in CFS, or some weight in CFS is helpful. So this is a really tricky hole, or beat, to design a fly around because there's really not the perfect weight because there's so many different elements. So this is why we do it. We like the challenge. We want to always make sure that we have something to learn and something to do. Now, we all know what fishy water looks like, but man, that's good stuff. So check this out. When you walk up to a hole like this, we'll scout off the bridge, and we're looking at places that we know fish are going to be holding, right? We've heard with trout, foam is home. Not uncommon to come in and see a bunch of carp eating off the foam and just lunching at the end of the day. When I come up to these places, I know fish are holding here, here, and here, and then once the level comes up and we get some more water, they'll be holding right there. So when I go, I know kind of where to look, but it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes I have to go down and hunt fish out. But this is a classic spill out beat. We got water coming in, deep hole into shallow. So they come out of that deep hole, all the food pushes down to the end, and they just hang out under structure and get fat. And hopefully eat our flies. Doesn't look that much different other than the overpass with graffiti, but a nice flat runs all the way through there. They just don't hang out there that often because they got all of that right there and on the other side. So they're going to take the protection when they can. Every once in a while, you'll catch them up on the flat, but if they have the choice, they're going to hug close. That little culvert is a pretty big place to catch fish. And then the wood pile. Man, I hate wood piles. You got to catch them. I was talking to Ryan about this. We call that rodeo fishing. If you pick a fish off by a wood pile, it's not set them and start cheering and high-fiving your buddy. You set and you're immediately trying to pull that fish away from that area and guide that fish into the tunnel to go downstream versus into that pile. I have a much bigger chance of landing that fish that way than that way. Good run, by the way. This is my beat last year, my afternoon beat. It was a good day. Sorry, I got a little self-reflective there. I mentioned earlier, I do feel the graffiti is better in the Denver section. You go farther north up to the 120th Ave beats, it's just not as good. I don't know what it is. I discussed this last night. I don't know if it's where the minor leagues of graffiti is on the northern beats, or if maybe you've kind of like gone past your game, you're not as good, and they kind of relegate you up north. But I do like the graffiti in the city beats for sure. That's the beat we just saw. That's the other side. And you can see like levels were low. That's usually underwater. We're in midsummer and levels are dropped, so we've got less water to work with. So that fish was big until someone caught a fish yesterday. Ryan, I'm not going to steal his thunder. I'll let him talk about that. But my prized possession suddenly got smaller after yesterday's fish, and rightfully so. It was a tank yesterday for sure. I will point out, only half of the fish is visible now. The other half of what you see is under the water. So it was a big girl for sure. Again, me understanding that if I fish that log break, I have to work deeper with shallow water outside. So this is a deep fly in about a 10-foot window. Trying to find a heavy fly to fish well in a 10-foot window and get down is not an easy task. You would think, just put heavier lead eyes on it and just get the damn thing down and you're good. The problem is I want the fly to still work and do what it's supposed to do and look like it's supposed to look rather than just give me vertical drag and vertical drop. So it's a tricky situation. A lot of times I've gotten into using intermediate lines. Like, all right, I'll fish my lighter fly and I'll throw an intermediate out there and just help it get down. With Carp Slam, I'll take Versaleaders. SA's got a great package of Versaleaders. They built them right. They end in a barrel swivel. You can put a fly and some tippet on and you're out and going. Great way to get a bug down without having to overweigh it. Same situation. Catch that fish there, I'm instantly moving over. I don't celebrate immediately with the eat, because if I do, he's going to be in that wood pile. Or even worse, there's always gaps in these. So they'll go under and around, and well, that's game over at that point. Any questions? Oh, come on. There we go.
This goes all the way back to your adhesives.
Yeah.
You ever use any of the UV cured adhesives rather than the water-based?
I do, but not on my carp flies. Yeah. And again, nothing wrong with this. I have cats that come into the store all the time. They've gotten into the habit of whip finishing and then hitting it with UV. It's going to work. The downside is that UV can chip and break away, which thread won't. So if you do it, make sure you're happy with your technique. Man, knock yourself out. It's unscented. It's not toxic. Yeah, it'll work. So if you happen to win the Carp Slam, you get a nice trophy. There is a beverage of your choice poured into the cup, and you have to drink it when you win. Not a tough gig, pretty cool. And then there's a barrage of gifts from rod company. I mean, Orvis is in there, Riversmith is in there, Essays. I mean, yeah, we have Fish Pond. We're very fortunate in Colorado to have a lot of happy reps to help us out in that situation. This is the crowd. So we gather the night before, and I usually bring some flies for my slamature that I tie up for everybody for the show that day. I try and give all the amateurs a handful of flies to fish that day as well. I have been beaten with the flies that I've given out. It's a win still, in my opinion. So what we're taking pictures of here is the beat assignments. So we gather that night. We put all the amateurs and all the pros in there. The amateur gets to go in and pull what pro they're going to have. And then this is our beats. The amateur comes up and pulls our 2 beats. Then we all know what we're fishing. We're all comparing notes. And then we go and get some sleep and start for the morning with beat number 1. Oh boy. Okay. Anyone here ever bridge fish for carp? Hell yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm on the board with DTU. It is highly discouraged to bridge fish. And if they ever see this, I do not bridge fish at all. I am telling you not to do this. Rick Mikesell, unbelievably golden soul and fishy dude altogether. We can thank him for the no bridge fishing. He hooked a car on a backcast. It did not go well. So don't backcast if you're on a bridge, that's all. We let a line out and then just basically do a pendulum swing and get her out there. I do find it easier to fish on the downstream, upside side of the downstream. That way you don't have to go the wrong way. The other thing is that if you're on a bridge and you hook a fish, you do have to figure out how to land it. So when you have 2 people, it's no biggie. You send your buddy down. But if you're by yourself, you got to figure it out. So real quick, I'll give you the 2 ways to do it. One, if it happens to be a bridge that you can actually, it isn't too far to walk down, you let some line out around the light pole, right? And you can walk down and still do it. There's a way to get there. This particular situation, there's not. What you do is you work the fish, you bring them into the shallows, you pull a bunch of line out, adjust your drag to where only the weight of the rod will actually go. So loosen my drag, grab the fly line, I feed my rod down, lay it down. There's enough line out to where if the fish wants to do something, I have a few more seconds to get there. And then you run fast, very fast. Down, you get your rod, land the fish, and you're golden. It has not happened to me where a fish has decided to swim off. Man, Ryan, you're just coming up in my presentation. You're all Ask him about it. It's a good one. It's unfortunate, though. It happens, right? Yeah, it's the risks we take, for sure. So this is the northern beats. Totally different look. So once you get up into the northern beats of the Denver South Platte, I'm designing more for that shallow water. It's ironic now that I'm here in a flat space scenario. Technically, I would imagine that I'm probably designing for a flat style presentation. The water's not that deep out there. I know I can fish my light flies. I don't have to fish anything too heavy, and I prefer in the river to have my fly tumble along the bottom versus just sitting down and me twitching it. I've also observed carp in the middle of shallow water, back and forth, eating. And they're basically watching debris or food come through, and they're moving over and eating it out of the lower column. So the wheels start spinning from a fly design point of view. Why do I want to set my fly in the bottom if they're moving around and eating out of the middle of the bottom column? My Detroit Mop City was literally based off of that eating habit. I wanted my eyes to be just heavy enough to make it get down and then tumble along in the first few inches of the bottom. That way, that was in the zone of where these fish were moving back and forth and eating. And again, food can tumble and move around all the time, but sitting down and twitching it in current just doesn't seem natural to me. And how many bugs swim toward the thing that may eat them? Yeah. So I swing that bug, this is the fish, to where now when it comes down, it's dotting down at an angle rather than right at them. So things are just moving around. This gives them a chance to do that same motion and move over and make the choice to eat the fly versus having something come right at them. Again, moving fish. I want that fish to make an effort to eat my fly. So when I get the weight right, and they come in small and medium lead eyes, higher CFS, lower CFS. Took a trip to Blackfoot. That's where I beta tested my Detroit Mop City. It worked. It's a nice fly in big water. I needed to get down deeper, and that fly it got down. I was able to come back and go back to my notes and really understand that as a sit down and twitch fly, it was good, but it wasn't doing what I wanted to do in the river. So I had like another month or so of adjustments, and then she was ready to go. Hey-o! Any final questions before the round table? Does anybody want to make up a question? Hey, here we go.
You talked about the chassis, you talked about weighting and all of that, which makes great sense. You
Yeah.
talked a lot about materials. Obviously, you want materials to do what you want to do, whether it be rabbit or marabou or dubbing or something like that, or rubber legs or vibration. So can you touch maybe just a little bit on maybe the material side of things? Why?
Absolutely. So he's asking to really kind of go a little more on why I make my material choices. So the more you tie, the more familiar you're going to get with what a material brings to the pattern or to the equation once it gets wet. Doesn't do anything for us until it's wet, right? So there's going to be a trial and error at a couple things for me. One is it a natural that's going to take on water and add weight? Is it a synthetic that I can shed water and get it back to a lighter fly? Those are going to come into consideration. My Detroit Mop City, my wakame salad, and my slinky reggae leech are all dubbing loop bodies that I basically pulled a technique from the Pacific Northwest in the steelhead crowd with composite dubbing loops. That scene, it blew my mind at their absolute intention of building a fly with mass without weight. So that blew my mind, that I can literally wrap in shoulders and mass on a fly and not add weight was just... So I implore, tie flies that you don't fish, it's fine. I spent the whole winter, like my winters are, one winter I went down the hopper rabbit hole. One winter I went down tenkara. I don't own a tenkara, I've never fished tenkara, but they're tied differently. So it makes your brain think a little differently, and you're going to pull something from that. The steelhead, that composite dubbing loop was paramount in finishing the development of those flies. Once more, once they have all those materials, you can only put dry materials so close to each other because of their bulk, but if you wet them, they compress. That's another secret. By wetting your dubbing loop, you can now stack those wraps so much tighter and closer together. And then when they dry, they fill out, and all of a sudden you've got this mass and shoulders built out to push water over the fly. I tie musky and pike stuff. more prevalent about talking about the hydrology of water over the bucktail, kicking back into the feathers and moving that fly around, right? Why can't that happen on a carp fly? It's just gonna happen in a smaller and quicker package. My mentality was, all three of those flies, I need to build up the shoulders to get to the head of that fly while building in taper. And if I wet those dubbing loops, I was able to build mass. And now, like my slinky reggae, that leech wobbles. That was the whole point was I wanted that thing to move on its own from a design point of view on the fall. The beginning, that fly would just slowly go down. I wanted it to look like it was swimming. So those shoulders allowed that water push to give this thing a little bit of a warble. That's all I needed, because now, whether it's falling or I'm twitching it, it's got a little more life to it. So you can absolutely make sure that your material choice benefits your end goal. But it's not gonna be, you're gonna have to go through a few things to kind of get there, for sure. But nothing's off limits. It's not like the fly tying police are, hey, did you buy that at Michael's? It's just not real. So don't think, so I work in a fly shop. It would behoove me to tell you to come and buy stuff at the fly shop. 95% of the stuff, fly shops, you're gonna have to go there. There's a good 5% and change that you can certainly get somewhere else and it'll work. The biggest difference is that most fly shop stuff will have a little more durability because of what we're using it for. But to sit there and tell you that I have not bought something from Michael's, I have not bought something from Joanne Fabrics is a complete and utter lie. I have. They know me in those places. It happens. Did I answer your question, brother? Heck yeah. All right, anything else, everybody?
Does that mean that you probably tie your flies on with a loop? Or?
Oh, that's a darn good question. Every fly I tie, even if I, for some reason, and you can slap me when I do, tie a size 20 on for trout, all in a loop. Every one. And here's why. I feel that behind the vise, I'm putting all this design into a fly, and if I put a clinch on it, the tippet is gonna dictate the fly's movement subsurface, which means my lift kit now is null and void because it's not gonna be able to do what it wants to do because the water is moving my tippet and influencing the fly. But with the loop knot, that fly can now, it has its choice, right? I can't control the current still messing up that fall or the descent, but I gave it a chance. So yeah, I'm 100% a loop fly guy. I tie a loop knot that I cannot find out where I found it. I know it was a tarpon guide. It's the loop, it's like every other loop knot, but it's one overhand and then two overhand knots. Seat, cinch, done, out. I can tie it in 10 seconds. It's a super fast, 100% knot, love it. But yes, I loop everything. No matter if it's trout, carp, mud, everything. The only time I tie clinch knots are on my streamer rigs when I'm tying to my, my barrel swivel, because I have to have a fail point in that signal flow. If I have nothing but 100% knots, I'm losing something on the gear side that I don't want to lose. So I have to make sure I tie in one knot that will fail if I have a critical poo hitting the fan moment. Most of those times if you're in a boat, you're not going to be able to back row and get it out. Sometimes you just pop it and keep going. There's times I'm across the river and I'm not going to wade all the way over there. You know, so having a weak point is a good thing. So I will use a clinch where I want something to break off, but 99% of the time outside of that scenario, it's going to be a loop. Awesome. Hey, thanks for letting me run my mouth about fly design. You know, thank you. And as serious and as nerdy and deep diving, just put a hook in the vise and have fun and create. That's really what it comes down to. It doesn't have to be as crazy as this, but you'll laugh out loud every time. Tying a fly with fur, feathers, and something synthetic and having a fish eat real things for a lot. It lives on eating real bugs. So when it eats something completely phony, it feels pretty darn good, not gonna lie. I laugh out loud every time. And as far as gear, I'm a fiberglass guy, just to touch on what they talked about earlier. I started off graphite and I went glass. I love what glass brings from a presentation point of view, no doubt. But at the end of the day, I was compromising my graphite with big fish, landing them. Rods are built to have that nice parabolic bend. Fish get too big, this is the first thing we do. You can start doing this, but I'm letting you know as you get older, those shoulders don't hold up as well with heavy fish. So I could still do that with a glass rod, bend it to the cork, land a big fish, and not worry about my rod blowing up in my hand. And then just because of that, I've kind of gone down the fiberglass road, and I just dig it. Yeah, that's about all I have. We're going to have a couple more presenters coming up here and just blowing your mind. But again, thanks for your time, everybody.